Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we are joined by John Sneisen, economic analyst here at WAM. Now, we know that central banks are incompetent. We know they don't work. We know that there's a long history of just massive failures when it comes to central banks. So John, can you tell us a bit about why we need to stray away from central banks and what they're doing wrong?
Yeah, well, first of all, central banks believe that they could plan an economy. So planning an economy is useless. You need to let the economy be free-floating and, things are going to go up and down. We can't think that we're going to, project the value of something to go up forever. It's been shown in the stock markets, it's a 7-year cycle. You got people believing that's going to go up forever, and it seems like people forget everything, and then it's like just down to the ground. But when it comes to central banking policies, there's so many policies lately that I think it's ridiculous what they're trying to put out there, and really think that it actually will change and make growth, because they want growth. Because the more debt you get that are unsustainable debt, we're not talking about mortgages and so on, that's held by people that are actually working hard and so on, but we're talking about the unsustainable debt, the government debt that they're getting into and so on. Now, what they're trying to do is one of the policies that they have is quantitative easing, and it's always stupid. I hate how they're trying to put all these different terms so nobody's going to understand what they're doing. They're basically printing new money, and then they're buying assets that are horrible, that have failed, that nobody wants, or they also use them to buy government bonds as well. Mm-hmm. So the government actually can get into debt, because nobody really wants to buy it anymore in the public. Yeah. Nobody thinks that government debt has any value, because we know that they're not going to be able to pay us back.
Yeah. So
that's one of them. And of course, another one is their wonderful new policy that's come out, which is negative interest rates. And we can say all we want about that, but it's really fair policy. What the initial thought was from these academics out there was that they would be able to force people to use their money out into the economy and create what they call it monetary velocity, or basically money changing hands fast into the economy, and making that actually, when that happens, economy actually happens. Well, the problem was monetary velocity is horrible right now. It's down at record lows, but then it just plummeted even further. Look at a great example is our good friends over in Japan, where people, I think we mentioned it quickly at one point when we were talking about negative interest rates, that people are stuffing their money in either their mattress or in their safes. And of course we had from Goldcore, Marco Byrne, talking about how there was actually people putting physical stacks of cash in gold vaults because they don't want in the banking system because of negative interest rates. So it's really a horribly failed policy, and it's just created even more stagnant economy. But then on top of this, we got to understand what they're trying to do. Central bank is trying to create inflation. That's what they think of, and that's what they want to get done. Well, now some of the major economies in the world have been in a deflationary state because of demographics. So you have Germany especially, and then of course the United States and Japan. Canada is also in a deflationary state because we had a big baby boom. There's a lot of, especially the Western countries mostly, have a huge demographic cliff. So think about it, when people get older, they downsize first of all, so they sell their house. And then they also start selling their assets. Now, that's going to cause a lot of issues in the market, because now people are going to try to sell their stocks, their bonds, and everything that they hold. Well, our generation, we don't believe in that, a lot of us, and we're not willing to pick up the slack by buying those assets and holding them. So it's going to be a lot of crashes from that. And then you're going to have desperate central banks believing that, we need inflation, so we need to either do quantitative easing. And of course, we got Helicopter Bernanke and his policy that he believed that they should just drop massive amounts of money onto the public and try to create inflation that way. Well, that's just going to eliminate the value of our currency and totally demolish it.
Yeah.
Well,
you made it. You mentioned Ben Bernanke there for a second, and it's good to kind of make sure that the viewer knows actually that you kind of beat him out on the charts on Amazon for a little while there, and that's something to be proud of, because that guy has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, or he's actually evil. And I mean, this thing I wanted to kind of get to was there. You made a keyword there, which was force, and you mentioned with negative interest rates, they're going to force you to pay out, and if there's a good idea, why does it need to be forced? If you have a good idea that works, why do you need to be forced to do it? Because if you're not forced to do it and it's voluntary, it's all going to collapse quite quickly, because there's nothing to hold it up. Can you go into a little bit of how they're going to force people with negative interest rates, and the fact that we are under this central banking system that we're also forced under, and then we have to pay interest, and it's just insanity. Can you go into that a bit?
Well, yeah, we're forced into a system where you have the fiat currency together, like central banks and banks together with government have created a system where they could force us to use this currency so they could benefit from that by creating this currency out of thin air and then create interest on it and get income from nowhere that didn't exist before. They could just create as much as they wanted. Most of these guys, they just want to buy assets and then see the asset price value rise, because that's what they can do by creating more money. Now suddenly when you hold that asset, well, of course that asset is gonna have you're gonna have more currency buying that asset.
Yeah.
So now you would always get this asset moving up as they're trying to preserve their value in commodities, because that's what most rich people and these guys, they understand it. I believe actually we're talking about one of the central bankers, what's his name, Paul Volcker, was recently interviewed, and it was interesting, at the Council of Foreign Relations, which is a secret society. It's out there, but you know, like people don't really know about it. But what he said in an interview, well, they cut out the part where he said this, was he talked about how gold is money, and it always has, it always will be, and he knows that this whole system is going to come down. Now, there's a whole bunch of array of other things we could talk about what central bankers have recently done. There was a central banker in Bangladesh. They believed that they can have their money secure and so on, and then they actually got hacked and lost $100 million worth of their currency. How is that even possible? How can you lose that out of your account? There was somebody breaking into the Bangladesh central bank deposit account or something it was, and then they took that money out. When it comes to these guys, they don't know what they're doing at all. They have zero thought over what could happen to us as people within that system. They don't really give it on about that. They just have an academic point of view, and they're looking at everything as an analytic and looking at numbers and so on, and we're just number in the pond for them. They don't really care about our life or how good we feel, as long as they could keep that inflation rate a little bit higher, about 2% every year. That's their goal. Then everything is good and everything is fine. Doesn't matter if we got massive riots in the streets because people can't afford to eat anymore. You had the Arab Spring. It was caused by a lot of manipulation of currencies and high inflation. And these central bankers, they don't understand anything about the history of money and how it works, I believe. I think some of them might have a little bit of an understanding of it, but I think some of them just don't have the historical perspective of understanding the system that they're in is failing. It always fails. It always has when they try to implement a fiat currency system and fractional reserve banking. It has a horrible record when it comes to succeeding. Now, I believe what they're going to continue to do is just continue putting down interest rates. We just saw recently, actually today, Norway again put their interest rate down to 0.5% from 0.75. We recently had, who was it now? It was, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the big bank of the world. They had their interest rate at zero, they just left it at 0.5%. They tried to show that we're gonna increase the interest rate from 0.25 to 0.5, but then everything was starting to go bad. So they're like, "Oh, we're not gonna even do anything because, well, at least we tried. We tried to get the economy up and running again, but it's something that's just functional in the economy. So we have to continue print money through quantitative easing. We got to do continuous bailouts of big corporations. Actually, getting right into the last thing I'm going to talk about is a potential secret bailout that might have happened. I've done a little bit of research, and of course you can't find where this money is gone. But in the Federal Reserve Capital Surplus account, what happened is about $20 billion disappeared from that account.
Yeah.
Well, where did that money go? And I looked into it, and a lot of experts in the field that actually understands how the central banks work and what the banks have been up to lately and so on, they believe that it was actually a bailout of the fracking industry, because it was horrible in the United States. Like they were about to go really bust just as of lately.
Yeah.
And some people believe that it was a secret bailout, and when you do the $20 billion and put it into the banking system now, with fractional reserve banking, the magic happens and you suddenly have $220 billion that you can bail out some of the bad loans.
Yeah.
Of course, there's over $1 trillion almost in bad loans, but that save them for a little bit. They push the problem a little bit further. So I have a slight of a hint of a clue that might have been happening right under our noses without any consent to ask anybody of us if that was okay, especially in the United States, if it was okay that they printed a whole bunch of money and then created a lot of more inflation for people over time because of their policies of thinking that bailing somebody out is going to help anybody. Look at how Chevrolet is doing now. All the GM companies, they have had a lot of recalls. Their whole company, compared to other of their competitors like Ford that didn't get a bailout, well, they've been suffering a lot from these. And you had big companies like AIG that created an unsustainable insurance conglomerate. Yeah. They should have been bankrupt. All these banks should have been bankrupt. So I believe it's just a point that we're going to get to where everything will eventually fail. Like we know we've been talking about this for a while now, Josh, but eventually they can't keep this Ponzi scheme up and running anymore, and they're going to run out of options. They're trying to implement the same type of Mario Draghi just put out his policy and said that, well, we're gonna lower interest rate. They just lowered the main interest rate down to zero now. So now they have zero, and then they lowered the deposit rate from -0.3 to -0.4. And then he said, well, we're going to do quantitative easing again. Well, look at the United States. It failed there. It failed everywhere that they tried it. But it's like Einstein said, trying to do the same thing over and over again without changing
your method.
Your method is the definition of insanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I believe central banking is the definition of insanity. Mm-hmm. I do believe they're going to have a big failure coming down their way pretty soon, because they can't contain the catastrophe that central banking in paper currency is anymore. And I talk to regular people now. I didn't hear this too much about 5-6 years ago when I started really getting into this. But now there's actually a lot of more people talking about inflation and believing in the value of their currency. So yeah. I think we're getting a lot closer to their whole paper empire collapsing.
Yeah, and it's so sad because this affects every single person, because people are forced into this kind of system. It's horrible. We see so much poverty in the world today, and then everyone's trying to give the wrong remedies without actually looking at the root cause of the poverty and why we see so much suffering, so much pain within the lower to middle class today. And people just don't want to look at the root cause. They don't want to have a real solution. They just want to continuously constantly pile on problem after problem after problem without any actual remedy, and it's so sad to see. But actually, I wanted to mention quickly that what John said earlier on, I can't really complain too much because I only know one language. He knows a few languages, which is pretty impressive. Not Paul Walker, it's Paul Volcker. Paul Walker, the late Paul Walker, was a lot cuter.
Yeah, not the guy that's driving cars. Yeah.
Paul Volcker is a much uglier person inside and out. And I wanted to leave you guys before we left with one clip by Alan Greenspan when he was interviewed on Charlie Rose several years ago, where he said in essence basically that the Federal Reserve didn't answer to anybody and was a private organization. I just wanted to lay that out so people can see it, and we're going to show you that clip in one moment.
Yeah, show the link also to what he when he actually talks about gold.
Yeah.
And what he thinks about it.
These people don't actually believe what they are implementing. You read actually Dr. Ron Paul's book In the Fed, and he talks about how he spoke with some of these guys back in the 1960s and into the 70s, and they were on his side. But then when it came to the big paycheck, they changed their way, and there's strings attached. And I think that much is clear over decades and decades and decades of this problem, and we see it persist. And we see people suffering, and our job here is to give you information to try and help you stay safe, stay insured, and be able to protect your family, because that's most important. Family, food, water, shelter, and sound money in order to survive any crash that may occur. So thank you very much, John. We're going to show you that clip right away. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. So long as that is in place and there is no evidence that the administration or the Congress or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relationships are don't frankly matter.